For nearly 20 years, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban were held up as one of the great love stories of modern celebrity, an Oscar-winning actress and a country music superstar who had found each other against all odds. They were the couple that gave cynics pause. They were the couple that made people believe. But behind the red carpets, the tearful award show speeches, and the carefully curated family photographs, something was quietly unraveling. Court documents now confirm what many had long suspected. Nicole filed for divorce after 19 years of marriage. Sources say she fought hard to save it before she did. His first public performance after the split told its own story. No wedding ring, no love song dedicated to her, and altered lyrics that seemed to rewrite the history they had shared. The golden couple image has shattered, and the truth of what happened is finally beginning to emerge. Nicole Mary Kidman was born in Honolulu, Hawaii, in 1967 to Australian parents who were temporarily living abroad. Her father, Anthony Kidman, was a clinical psychologist and biochemist. Her mother, Janelle, was a nurse and educator. When Nicole was still a child, the family returned to Sydney, where she was raised in a household built on discipline and ambition. Unlike the poised and luminous figure she would later become, young Nicole was painfully shy. She would blush so intensely when asked to speak in class that her teachers genuinely worried about her confidence. Yet, beneath that timidity was a powerful imagination and a hunger to express herself. She found refuge in performance, first in ballet, then in drama classes, and eventually in youth theater, where she could channel emotions she found impossible to express in everyday life. By her teens, her talent was undeniable. Australia's film industry was blossoming at the time, and Nicole seized her moment, landing roles in television movies and eventually appearing in the 1983 cult thriller BMX Bandits. Her striking features and unusual height made her stand out. But it was her emotional range that convinced directors she was destined for something far greater. By the late 1980s, Hollywood came calling. It was during this rise that Nicole met Tom Cruise, her first great love and her first great heartbreak. They married in 1990, becoming one of Hollywood's most photographed couples. For Nicole, the marriage brought prestige, but also pain. Scientology cast a long shadow over their union, and when a marriage ended in 2001, she lost not just a husband, but also primary custody of their two adopted children, Isabella and Connor. This wound cut deep. Friends later revealed that Nicole felt stripped of motherhood itself, relegated to the edges of her own children's lives. For a woman who had always longed for a family of her own, this rupture became one of the defining traumas of her life. It is perhaps no coincidence that when she later met Keith Urban, she was utterly determined to rebuild the dream of home and family she had lost. Keith Lionel Urban was born in Whangarei, New Zealand, the same year as Nicole. His family relocated to Queensland, Australia, while he was still young, and it was there that his personality took on a restless, searching quality, a spirit constantly reaching for something just out of grasp. His father, Bob, owned a convenience store, but was deeply passionate about country music, a genre not exactly mainstream in suburban Australia. He encouraged young Keith to pick up the guitar, and by the age of 6, the boy was already performing. Country music, with its tales of heartbreak and redemption, gave him both identity and therapy. But while his musical talent was exceptional, his home life was less harmonious. Financial struggles and family tension marked his early years, which may have contributed to his lifelong search for stability. In his teens, he performed in talent shows and small bars, cultivating his image as the brooding outsider with a rock star's edge. He dropped out of school to pursue music full-time. There was no plan B. Music was his only ticket out. But along with the talent came demons. By his 20s, he was already battling alcohol and substance abuse. Fame, when it arrived, didn't steady him. It amplified the chaos. He moved to Nashville in the early 1990s, hungry for recognition, and after years of grinding on the circuit, his breakthrough finally came in 1999 with his self-titled American debut album. Suddenly, Keith was country music's new heartthrob. known for his guitar prowess, tousled hair, and a voice that dripped with longing. But behind the success, self-destruction lurked. By the time he met Nicole in 2005, he had already been in and out of rehab, living with the perpetual fear that his addictions might cost him everything he had fought so hard to build. Nicole and Keith seemed, on the surface, to come from different worlds. Hollywood prestige versus Nashville grit. But what truly bound them was the baggage they each carried. Nicole bore the scars of a lost family and a marriage that had made her deeply wary of control and betrayal. Keith carried the volatility of a man who had known both obscurity and fame, but had never quite conquered the urge to sabotage himself. When their paths crossed in 2005, both were at turning points. Nicole had re-emerged from her divorce stronger than ever, winning an Academy Award for The Hours and cementing her place as one of the greatest actresses of her generation. Yet she remained emotionally raw, craving stability after a decade of turbulence. Keith was a star on the rise, but the demands of an industry that prizes image as much as sound were pushing him to the brink. He needed someone who could anchor him, someone who could help him believe in something beyond the stage lights. Looking back, it is impossible not to see the foreshadowing. Her desire for control and stability was always going to clash with his restless, addictive personality. Their union carried the promise of healing. Perhaps she could rebuild the family she had lost, and he could find redemption in her steadiness. But it also carried the seeds of future conflict. Their first spark came at the Day USA Gala in Lausanne. Gellies in January 2005, a celebration of Australians working in Hollywood. When they were introduced, Nicole later admitted she didn't think he was interested. He was polite but reserved, and though they exchanged numbers, he didn't call her for months. She confessed years later that his initial silence nearly derailed the love story before it had even begun. But when he finally reached out, something clicked. Their romance moved quickly. By May, they were photographed together. By the end of the year, she was describing him in interviews as the man who had swept her off her feet. For her, after the suffocating surveillance of her marriage to Tom Cruise, Keith represented freedom, passionate, raw, and unpolished in every way Tom wasn't. For Keith, she represented legitimacy, elegance, and the kind of stabilizing force he had never known. In June 2006, just over a year after they began dating, they married in a lavish ceremony at the Cardinal Soretti Memorial Chapel on Sydney's Manly Peninsula. She wore a Balenciaga gown with a dramatic veil. He wore his trademark long hair and looked every bit the romantic troubadour. The guest list glittered with Hollywood royalty and country music stars, but the real story was the intimacy of the moment. She reportedly walked into the church by candlelight, holding back tears while he serenaded her during the reception. For fans, it was the picture-perfect ending to two troubled pasts. Just 4 months after the wedding, Keith checked himself into rehab for alcohol abuse. It was a devastating blow to their newlywed bliss. The tabloids pounced, suggesting she had married a time bomb. For him, the relapse was humiliating. He had vowed that her love would be enough to keep him steady. Nicole chose loyalty over embarrassment. She stood by him, visiting him in rehab and refusing to give the press the satisfaction of seeing her falter. He later credited her with saving his life during that period. But insiders saw something more complicated at play. She had been denied the chance to save her marriage with Tom, and now she was throwing herself into the role of healer and protector with fierce determination. Despite the shaky start, the couple spent the following years crafting their image as one of Hollywood's rare, enduring romances. She continued to take on major film roles. He solidified his status as one of country music's biggest stars, winning multiple Grammy Awards. Publicly, they were deeply affectionate. She once described him as the person who brought her back to life. He frequently thanked her at award shows, sometimes with tears in his eyes. Behind the curated image, however, there was tension. His career meant long stretches on the road, while she often filmed abroad. They tried to make it work, even implementing rules like never spending more than a few weeks apart, but their schedules frequently clashed. when they welcomed their first daughter, Sunday Rose, in 2008, followed by Faith Margaret in 2010, Nicole poured herself into motherhood. He adored his children, but struggled with the balance between fatherhood and the restless life of a touring musician. By the time they reached their first decade of marriage, they had survived more turbulence than most couples endure in a lifetime, and yet, for years, they remained a symbol of resilience. By the mid-2010s, rumors of tension began surfacing more frequently, whispers of arguments over schedules, over Keith's nightlife, over Nicole's intensity. The couple consistently denied the speculation. Friends close to them described her as someone who had grown increasingly weary of carrying the emotional weight of his struggles. Keith, meanwhile, sometimes pushed back against being cast as the one who always needed rescuing. He wanted to be her equal, not her project. What kept them together for so long was the same thing that was slowly pulling them apart, their very nature as a couple. Nicole loved his vulnerability, but feared it. He loved her strength, but felt overshadowed by it. Their marriage was a constant negotiation between saving and resisting, between passion and exhaustion. By 2023 and 2024, the whispers grew louder. Anonymous sources hinted they were living separate lives, together but apart. Paparazzi photos began to support the narrative. She started attending events solo. He was spotted on tour